Good morning and welcome to Whiteboard Wednesdays with Pastor Aaron. Today I want to talk a little bit about the idea of maturity. We all want to talk about maturity. We all want to think and feel and believe that we are mature. And one of the things that we need to understand is just because we achieve a certain age does not mean that we're mature. We have aged. A 16-year-old feels that they have reached a certain pinnacle, 18, 21, and then we get into the decades, right? Now I'm in my 30s, I'm in my 40s, I'm in my 50s, I'm in my 60s, and so on. And we believe that with each level of decade or each level of accomplished task, that we've automatically arrived in this sense of maturity. And the reality is, it doesn't matter what age you are. You could be low, middle, or high maturity. And so I want to talk about that. This is going to be a two-part session. So we're going to talk about the first half today, and then we'll talk about the second half next Wednesday. Now, I've gathered a lot of the diagramming and material from Stephen Covey. I want to give him credit, and the 7 habits of a highly effective people. This is something that I went through training on, I guess, coming up on 30 years ago. But you know what? Truth is truth, and it rings true even today. And so I want us to walk through some of these things today, and then we will be able to digest some of it over the weekend. We'll come back next Wednesday, and we'll look at the second half of it. So let's begin today. All right, so we're going to begin with 3 terms, and these are 3 terms that we need to understand. The first term, dependence. To be dependent on somebody else is, in the overall sense, the lower end of maturity. Now, the mistake that we make is, okay, so the opposite of dependence is independence, so therefore I'm now mature. Well, you've reached a middle level of maturity. You haven't reached high maturity yet. High maturity is when we understand interdependence. The Bible even tells us that we are built for relationship. God made everything. He saw that it was good. He made Adam. There was no helpmate for Adam. It was not good. He might have been independent, but it was not good until God provided him Eve, and now they had an understanding of interdependence. This is still even a part of our spiritual walk and your spiritual walk. We want to sometimes to lead people to understand that, you're spiritually mature if you are fully dependent on God. And I think that we misrepresent that to some degree. Psalm 24:1, of course we are all dependent on God. He owns it all. So, we need to understand that there is that level of dependence on God, and I'm not supposed to do things outside of that. But look at it this way. I'm not supposed to be independent of him, although that's where a lot of spiritual beliefs are today. I am my own person. I'm the captain of my own fate. I'm the master of my own destiny. I am independent. I can do whatever it is I want to do. But that's not where we're supposed to be. There is a level of interdependence that we have this relationship going on. You say, well, wait a minute. Well, where do you find that in Scripture? Okay, let's look at it this way. Who is in charge of spreading the gospel? That's you and me, right? So in a sense, but in God's eternal wisdom, he has chosen to depend on us to share the gospel. He's depending on us to live a life worthy of the calling, to prove the life that we claim we have, so that the world may know and the world may hear about the good news of Jesus Christ. So, if we Dependence in this perspective means I'm depending only on me, or as we're going to find out as we unpack this a little bit, dependence in low maturity situations means that my emotional mood depends on your emotional mood. And I want to help us understand how to move to a sense of independence concerning these kinds of things. If I'm in a low maturity setting, then I don't really care about the end of life. I care about today. I live for today, don't care about tomorrow. That is, you're just depending on things as they come, and there's no level of independence. We must move through the process to independence, but not get stuck in independence, because that isolates you. It keeps you out of proper relationships. You're not working in groups well. You're not working in relationships well. In fact, you're going to find it hard to be in a relationship, and maybe you have had failed relationship after failed relationship after failed relationship. Or maybe you've had failed job after failed job after failed job. Maybe you keep getting bad performance reviews, and you're like, I don't see the problem. I don't know what the problem is, and nobody's actually told you, look, you got to grow up a little bit. Or they did tell you got to grow up, but because you're now in your 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, and you're still getting told that, you're just blaming them on not understanding who you are. And the reality is, you might actually be immature, and it's not about age. So let's talk about some of these things here today. All right, so I'm going to slide the board down, and so we can get an idea of what's going on here. So as you can see, we're starting here in a low maturity situation, and today we want to move into that middle awareness, anyway, of a middle stage level of maturity. And this is going to all be centered around the private victories that you choose to win, the battles you choose to face, and the battles you go into. Now, it doesn't mean to go in by yourself. You need God. That's the relational side, and that's a portion that we have to begin to entertain. But I must tell you that we have to understand that much of what we're going to talk about today, you have the choice to make. In fact, let's just start there. The first one is all about choices. Now we can use the big term to be proactive. That's what Covey uses, and it's a good term. Proactivity. To be on the front side of activity. To be responsive, not reactive. Proactive says, I'm seeing something that's going on, and I'm going to choose to act in that way. I'm going to choose to be a part of that. To be the choices that we're talking about in this private victory says, I'm going to be responsible for my actions, and I'm going to be responsible for my emotions. You say, what do you mean by that? This is what I mean by that. Have you ever said, he makes me so mad? Okay, who's owning you at that point? You or the person? Who's driving your emotions? Oh, come on now. People do stuff all the time, and you say you get frustrated. I do. And in those moments where I am allowing another person to control my emotion, when I allow another person to control my mood, and so I'm swinging moods depending on who I'm with, I'm in a low maturity situation because I'm just reacting to the environment that's around me instead of taking a moment of independent thought and stepping outside of the situation and saying, no, wait a minute. Just because they're mad, do I need to be mad? Just because they're cantankerous, do I need to be cantankerous? Just because they want to gossip about somebody, do I need to also involve myself? Just because they're going to be telling vulgar jokes, do I need to jump on the bandwagon of that? See, this is being actively engaged in your daily life. Too many of us just run through our day. We are just reacting here and there, and we're just whatever comes, and we just are whatever mood is in the room at the time. And that is not being a mature follower of Jesus Christ. He's given you the power by the Spirit that lives within you to make choices. And this is an important first step toward independence. If we want to move from dependence to independence, we have got to begin making the choices. Well, I got to go here. Well, I got to go there. Do you have to go? No, you don't have to go. You choose to go. And I know this sounds like a word play game, but it's not. It's really a mentality that you need. Well, I got to go to church today. Do you? Well, I got to read my Bible today. Do you? No. You don't have to go to church. You don't have to find us on YouTube. You don't have to read your Bible. You don't have to pray. God's not standing there with a gun to your head saying, pray right now. He's not doing that. So let's stop using terms that create low maturity and are creating within us these moments of non-growth. We want to grow. I want to see you grow. I want to see you move up in this moment of maturity. And we have to start by having this sense of choice and proactivity. Well, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do about it. No, that's not true. There is something you can do about it. You can explore the alternatives. See, it's easy to say, I have no choice. It's easy to abdicate responsibility. It's easy to blame somebody else. This is what Adam and Eve did. Well, that woman you made me, God. Well, that snake. Okay, see, they're blaming. They're in a low maturity moment. They're not responsible. They're not choosing to take responsibility for the choice they made. They'd rather blame it on somebody else. So when we get age-wise all grown up, we need to also become emotionally all grown up and stop blaming Dad for not being proud of me as the reason why I'm doing the stupid things I do today. We need to stop blaming our parents, blaming our spouse, blaming our bosses. We need to even stop blaming our kids that, well, I'd be in a better mood, but my goodness, no. Take control. You've been given the ability to do that. We need to take control and make the choices that need to be made today. So that's the first one, is a sense of choices. Now, the second step that we need to talk about is what is called beginning with the end in mind. Let me go back. Over here, you've got Psalm 32, and I've got 3 through 5. Psalm 32, 3 through 5. And that's just talking about David, and this is his confessional psalm. 32 and 51 are the confessional psalms. And he's saying, look, I'm choosing to own this responsibility. In fact, when I was trying to avoid it, it actually was harming me and hurting me, and so I need to make some choices. Go read those verses. It's very incredible to talk about and to think about that David was learning to own his own choices, and he needed to do that before God, and we need to do the same thing. We need to own that before God. So here, that's our choices. And so let's continue to look at the next one, and I'll put the scripture verse so I don't forget that. Begin with the end in mind. You've got Matthew 24. This is Jesus speaking on the end of time. This is Jesus speaking of things to come and what's going to happen. And he says in 42 to 44 that we need to be prepared. In other words, we need to think ahead, and we need to think forward, and we need to consider what's coming and what do I need to do today to be prepared for that. Philippians 3:13, this is a letter of Paul. And Paul says, I am forgetting what lies behind, and I focus on this one thing, what lies ahead of me. Forget what's behind you, what lies ahead of me. And that's very important for us to understand. And we need to realize that we need to be focusing on what lies ahead. You can't change what has already happened. So we need to move forward and think forward. One exercise that I would encourage you to think about is this. What do you want people to say at your funeral? Oh, I'm not thinking about that. Well, you should, because who knows? You don't know when you're going to die. You don't know what's going to happen. What do you want people to say about you at your funeral? Start today getting to that point. Well, I want to be known as a faithful spouse. Then be faithful today and continue to work on. You can't start a month before. You can't start when you're already in palliative care to start living this way and expect that to be the reality of what shows up at your funeral service. If you want to be known as faithful, you want to be known as giving, if you want to be known as being kind or compassionate or merciful or a strong, faithful follower of Christ or the best dad or the best grandma ever, well, it starts today. It doesn't start in years to come. These are character traits that you have to begin thinking about now. I want to be known as this person. Are you that person today? Or at least are you striving more toward being that person this year than you were last year? This is beginning with the end in mind. And we have to stand away from the emotion of the situation and say, what do I want to be known as? What does God want me to be known as? How does that work? And what do I need to think? You got to think about that, and you have to take into consideration these things. And so this is the second level of moving from dependence to independence. Instead of just living for today, that's a low maturity. Well, just whatever feels good, let's do it. Okay, that's low maturity. That is no planning. There's no planning involved in that. There's no preparation. There's no vision for that. You're just living by the seat of your pants. You're just getting up, going to work, going back to bed. You have no thought. And here's the reality. You get to the end of your day, you get to the end of your week, or the end of your month, or you get to the end of the year, and you say, what did I actually accomplish? I worked a lot, I was busy, but what actually happened? What actually went on? What did I actually accomplish? Did I do anything beneficial? See, you've got to have a plan. You've got to have a plan of what you need to do and what you want to do. All right, third thing, and this is about priorities. Putting the first things first. The illustration is a well-known illustration of the jar and the rocks. You have, Professor got up, he had this big jar, and on the table he had big rocks, middle rocks, small rocks, pebbles, sand, and water. And he said, which should I put in first? You see, if you put the sand and water in first, you'll never get the big rocks in. But if you got to decide what's most important to me. What is important? What am I all about? What's important to me? And put that in your day first. Put that in first before you start adding in all these other things. Otherwise, you're going to add in all this other stuff. You're going to get real busy and worn out and tired, but you're going to be meaningless, purposeless, missionless, and you're going to wonder at the end of the day, what is life all about? And that leads to depression. It can lead to suicide, all because you haven't taken the time to understand what's my purpose, what's my mission, what should I do, what are the roles that I play, and how do I want to play that? I'm making the choices. I know the kind of person that I want to be. Now I have to set up a priority structure and understand this and check back in with it. It's not a once and done situation. You check back in. You look at last week and you say, hey, did I live up to the expectations I have established for myself last week? Yes, that's great. Are there areas that you need to improve? Yes, I do. Okay, so what do you need to do? You need to plan that. Okay, how can I do better this week than last week? Are there areas that you totally flopped at, man? You just failed at it and you hurt people along the way. Okay, do you need to go apologize? Do you need to go make amends in some capacity? What do you need to do? This is a sense of priority. Matthew 6:33 talks about putting the first things first. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then all these things will be added unto you. But it's a priority structure, isn't it? Having a sense of private victory begins with choices, looking at the end of your life and what kind of person do I want to be? So what do I have to do to get there? And then setting up priority structures and having integrity. That's what this is really about, is a sense of integrity. And saying, that's the person I want to be. I'm going to own that. So this is what it's going to take for me to do that. And I'm going to have a sense of integrity in the moment of choice. Because the choice is going to come. The temptation is going to come. And you've already said, I'm not going to say I've got no choice. You have a choice. In fact, 2 Corinthians 10:13 says you have a choice. That no temptation is unknown. We have the temptation, but you are not forced to sin. So if you say, I had no choice but to sin, that's simply you living in a sense of dependence of your surroundings. You haven't experienced a private victory because you have a choice you can make. You can choose what you do in the moment of choice. Have some integrity. Put your priorities in place. Look, we all have our days, we all have our moments, we all have our failures and our shortcomings. That's why Paul over and over and over encouraged the church to give space and grace and mercy for those that may fall short. Not that we don't hold people accountable for their words and actions, but at the same time, try to be loving and merciful with an idea of redemption in mind and reconciliation in mind as much as you are able to do. But you personally, choices, looking at the end, and priorities. This is going to move you from a low level of maturity to a mid-level of maturity, and you're living toward a sense of independence. And it doesn't mean isolation. Independence simply means you don't control how I feel. You don't control what I do. I'm going to own my feelings. I'm going to own my responses. I'm going to choose to respond, not react. I'm going to have a priority structure of the kind of person I want to be. I'm going to evaluate that on a regular basis, and I'm going to live with a sense of integrity. This is moving higher into levels of maturity. This plays out in organizations as well, and understanding that even at the organizational level, we have to make some choices. We have to ask ourselves, even at the organizational level, am I going to blame everything on everybody else? Am I going to blame our low revenues on, well, that's just, people just, no. At what point are you at fault for doing what you're doing or not selling the product that's necessary, or you haven't marketed it properly, or you're not getting it out there, or you've got to own some of those things. You have to ask yourself, what kind of organization do we want to be? What kind of organization do we want to be known for in the community or in the global community, especially in the business world? What kind of organization do you want to be? And set up the priorities that are going to say, no, these are our non-negotiables. These are the non-negotiables. We're going to do it. We're going to be ethical. We're going to be moral. We're going to be upstanding. And it doesn't matter what happens. These are the morals and the ethical behaviors that we are going to hold ourselves to. We're going to hold our staff to. We're going to hold our constituents to that work for us. And move even organizationally, move from a reactionary to a response. Moment of maturity. Dependence to independence. Well, that's the first half. Next time, I'm going to talk about moving into high maturity, moving from independence up to interdependence as we can continue to look at this. I hope you have a great day. I hope that helps. If you got any questions or if you need anything further explained, feel free to email me at aaron@fbccrowley.org. You can post it in the chat down below and say, hey, what about this? I don't understand that. Help me understand this, or whatever. If you feel that this is helpful, I'd love for you to share this with other people. It gets the word out, it gets the message out, and it just helps people move along in their personal journey. We want to love people to encourage them to take steps forward in their journey of life. So let's do that together. Love you guys. We'll see y'all tomorrow.